3PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R., and with me on this episode is Seth Shostak from SETI. How are you doing, sir?
Just fine.
Good. I'm thankful for having you on. I really appreciate your time.
Not at all, Adam.
I was watching some of your older videos, getting a little more educated. It's you got a wealth of information. It's an overwhelming amount.
Well, I don't know. Doesn't seem that way to me, but I'm glad somebody thinks so.
So one of the main questions asked is, what got you involved with SETI? What made you go that direction?
Well, I studied astronomy in graduate school, and I actually was doing research on galaxies. But it occurred to me when I was doing that, you could use radio telescopes, which were the instruments I was using. You could also use them to try and track down aliens. And that was a pretty romantic idea. So when I moved to this part of California, Northern California, back in 1988, the people at the SETI Institute found out I was in town. They called me up. They said, "You want a job?" And so that's what happened.
Awesome. So the inspiration came from like a childhood thing then?
Yeah, well, I was always interested in aliens, but I think most people are interested in aliens, at least to some degree.
Yeah, same for me. As a kid, I was super interested. In fact, it's when I hit my teens and 20s is where I lost it. And then in 2017, the videos from the military came out and it was done. I was sold, right?
Yeah, well, I was interested in them because of all the movies I saw as a kid. When I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I was going to the movies every weekend, and I liked the sci-fi films best of all. And they often had aliens who'd come to Earth in a bad mood.
Yeah, I don't know why that was. You'd think they traveled so far. They definitely want to learn something.
Well, maybe they were just hungry. I don't know.
So here's a theory I have. And again, everything I speak is not science. It's based on my childhood curiosity and wild imagination. I have a theory that the gray aliens are robotic, advanced robots with the consciousness uploaded, and that we're under a long-term study if they are coming here, right? That's the theory in that movie. As far as SETI, you're at the front lines of looking. Like you're the guy. You're the person they should be making movies on.
Well, I don't know about that, but indeed, SETI is a very small endeavor, and I happen to be one of the people involved in SETI. That's true. But the SETI people, if you talk to them, and I do, you won't find many of them that think we're being visited. That's a different group of people.
Right.
That's a much larger group of people. So they don't. If you ask them what about the grays, they'll say, "Well, I'll talk to my stylist and get those dyed." So that they don't show anymore.
Yeah, the thing for the grays for me, that whole theory comes in this, because I watched on another podcast on Lex Friedman, and the scientists on that program said something that it would take them 10,000 generations to get here, and if they were traveling by basic means like what we use as propulsion. So I'm in a torn position. I have no real official position on anything, but the interest of SETI for me is the fact that you're looking out there, and so you're just trying to discover other worlds, yes?
Well, we actually are not so much in the business of discovering other worlds. We leave that to the astronomers who are into so-called exoplanets.
Right.
And there are plenty of those. In fact, even at the SETI Institute, there are people who do that. So, they found thousands of planets around other stars. What we're trying to do is see if any of them are, the homes of planets that have inhabitants that are broadcasting signals into space. And if they are, and we pick up the signal, then at least we know they're there.
Right. From what I read, I don't know. Again, I'm not from a science background, but from what I read, it takes like 100,000 years for a radio wave to cross the Milky Way, yeah?
Yeah, but we're not looking that far away. We typically look out to a distance of roughly 200 light years. So if we pick up a signal anywhere in our sample, those signals would have left the planet maybe 100 years ago, maybe 150 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Depends on which particular star system it is, but certainly not 100,000 years.
Right. And well, I mean, for that's generations to come across that. So far, though, for you, anything hopeful?
No, this is not an endeavor where you get close, right? Either you found the signal or you haven't. And until you have, you haven't. So that's where we are. I'm optimistic that something will happen, something positive will happen in the next, say, 15 years or so. But that's because the equipment is getting better all the time.
Yeah, speaking of which, on the horizon, what's coming out? I mean, is there something in the works that we have as far as technology that's going to increase our ability to do this?
Well, it's mostly based on computers. So the fact that computers are getting faster all the time, they more or less double in speed every 2 years, roughly. That's the biggest factor in terms of the speed of the search. The other thing is money. Money's not a terribly interesting thing to talk about, not in this regard. But without money, you can't do very much. With more money, you can do more.
Yeah, you got to hit that Elon up, huh?
Yeah, well, I'm waiting for him to answer my email.
You never know, right? Maybe you'll hear this and maybe it's time.
It could be. It could be. I've spoken with him, but not much has happened.
Huh. So in your research and all the time, so I'm going to go to, there's an internet question I got. It's from Facebook. This guy Ferry asks, why does nobody look at the wow reply at the number 432? And I'm not familiar with that, what he means by that.
Well, I'm not sure I do either. There was the wow signal that right. was, 1977, I think it was. And it was picked up at the Ohio State Radio Observatory near Columbus, Ohio. And that was one of the better signals that was ever picked up in a SETI experiment. But it was never seen again. It wasn't seen again, actually, even a minute after it was first picked up. So if you can't see it a second time, you don't really know what it was. I mean, maybe it was ET. Maybe it was some sort of, something funky in the receiving equipment or in the software. I mean, one doesn't know.
Yeah, as we're learning, even, I read a lot of stuff and I watch a lot of documentaries. In fact, you've been a part of a lot of them. It turns out that there's just regular sounds that the universe itself makes. Well, I mean, that's true. If by sound, you mean that they're emitting radio waves. Of course, in space, there's no such thing as sound, really, because you don't have any medium to conduct the sound. But there are radio waves, and of course, obviously, light. You can see stars with your naked eye that are, 1,000 light years away. But yes, a lot of things do make radio waves. I mean, Jupiter makes a lot of radio noise. The sun does. Saturn does to some extent. I mean, there are hot gas, cold gas, all of this makes radio noise. But that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for naturally produced radio noise. How do you go about filtering that?
Well, if it's a signal that's only at one frequency, it's only at one spot on the radio dial, then that's obviously made by a transmitter, right? I mean, your local, radio station, FM, AM, or TV, any of them, they're at a certain spot on the dial, 101.5 megahertz on your dial, well, wherever it is, right? They're not all over the dial. You can only hear that stationed at the one spot on the dial. So that's the signature, if you will, of a transmitter, and that's what we look for. So currently, what direction? So you did say, you gave me a pretty good idea of where you're looking currently, but is there anything right now that has the full interest of SETI? Well, we just do big surveys. We're trying to look at as many star systems as possible. The group over at the University of California, Berkeley, across the bay here, have an intention to look at 1 million star systems over the course of the next 5 or 10 years. Now, that's a large number. If you don't find anything after having looked at 1 million star systems, no, that becomes somewhat interesting. And you might even dare to say, well, it doesn't seem like anybody's at home. I don't think that that's the right conclusion, but it would be a little disconcerting if you looked at 1 million star systems and still didn't find anything. Yeah, as far as finding, so let's use a hypothetical. You're looking somewhere, you find something you think is interesting. What's the protocol after that? Well, there is a protocol. I was the chair of the committee that actually reworked those protocols. And the protocols say, I mean, you can find them online. They're not secret. The protocols say, if you find a signal, check it out. Secondly, tell everybody. And third, don't send any response without getting the agreement of some international body, presumably the United Nations. But in fact, while those all sound nice, it's not what actually happens. In case you find a signal, the media are on top of it right away. And in fact, whenever we picked up a signal that looked interesting, immediately the newspapers and the TV stations start calling.
How are they in the know of that?
Well, there's no policy of secrecy. I mean,
Right.
somebody sends an email to their cousin, and their cousin sends an email to the local newspaper, whatever.
The unfortunate chain, right?
Well, it's not unfortunate. As I say, there's no secrecy. So
yeah, but then the letdown is like, let's say it was a hiccup and they made it outrageous. It went viral, right? And then you sit there, have to explain to 1,000 people over and over again, like, well,
that would be the responsibility of the media, right? All we could say is, we're picking up signals, but of course we pick up signals all the time. So maybe by now they know they shouldn't get too excited just because they've heard that there's a signal. It has to be confirmed.
Yeah, you said before, or you feel strongly in the next 15 years maybe we'll find something.
Yeah, I think so. I bet everybody a cup of coffee that'll happen.
I saw you say that.
Yeah,
I saw you say that. I was like, wow, that's pretty dangerous.
It is, because I could be in for a lot of coffee.
Yeah, Starbucks would definitely be one of their key investors. So, what is your personal belief? Like, as far as what we're going to find and what to anticipate. Like, what do you believe? Everyone has their own belief system.
Well, in terms of what? You mean what's behind the microphone?
Yeah, so here's what I say. Like, if I think we're going to find life elsewhere, and this is upsetting for SETI, but I have this belief system, if it's complex life, that it's probably primitive, and it's, could be in its Stone Age or its Roman era, right? Or the Bronze era, for all we know. Like, I'm sure I hear the math about what could potentially be out there, and there's a crazy amount of galaxies and stars and so on. And I have to think to myself, a lot of those probably do have life, but it's infantile. It's still primitive in the sense where it might be even in its Stone Age.
Well, Stone Age is essentially yesterday, right? So if they can get to the Stone Age, I think most of them will make it to the point of being able to build a radio transmitter. Because the difference is only a few tens of thousands of years. That's nothing, right, in the history of life on the Earth.
Right.
The question is whether you ever get to the point of having a Homo sapiens or anything like it. And, that's controversial until you find another example. You can't be sure. I mean, even just getting life started, right? I mean, life on Earth began about 4 billion years ago. And for the first 3.5 billion, you would need a microscope to see any of it.
That's true.
So, the real trick is to get that first organism going. And then after that, to get to something that's reasonably complex. But you're not likely to have a very intelligent critter unless you have a critter that's made of more than one cell.
Yeah. So, and that makes sense, because then you're thinking in terms that I didn't even think of. For people that want to get involved at SETI, and obviously the direction you went in, you've gotten your scholarships, et cetera, but people that just want to be involved from an outside, how can they be more involved? Because one of the questions I had from Facebook, and it was asking if the SETI program will ever be available to use, again, from to listen for signals from home. Was that a thing?
Yeah. It was a thing. SETI at Home, it was called, as your correspondent.
Oh, I see. Yeah, he did. He put SETI at Home. His name's Alan.
Yep.
And it's for recordings, data, and screensavers.
Yeah, indeed. It was a screensaver. It was developed actually by a fellow up in the Seattle area.
Right.
And I actually got a call from one of the people involved, and he said, hey, this would be a good thing to do, where you use your, people's home computers, right? They're using their computer, and they get up from the chair to go make themselves a tuna fish sandwich or something. And the computer's on, but it's not doing anything. It's just waiting for you to come back. And during that downtime, why not do something useful, like look for signals in SETI data? That was the idea.
Huh. And
it didn't work for our experiment at the SETI Institute, but it did work for the program that was being run at the University of California, Berkeley, because for them, it didn't matter that the people looking at the data and maybe finding something, they might be doing that 3 weeks after the data were taken. Right? That's a little different. When we find a signal, we try and verify it right away. But for them, they couldn't do that, so they didn't mind that it might take a while. So they adopted it. They improved the screensaver, and it was SETI at Home. It had at least 7 million downloads for the screensaver. So there were, millions of people running it. But about a year or so ago, the people at the University of California, Berkeley decided to put it on hold. And the only reason was, it didn't have anything to do with the worth of the program. It was only that it takes manpower just to maintain it all. And they couldn't afford that anymore.
Yeah, because when that question came in via Facebook, I put it out to a poll system to kind of find out more about. So it's unfamiliar territory for me, and the number that came back, and it was staggering. A lot of people are interested in it, which made me interested in it. So,
yeah, no, it's not running at the moment. I don't know whether Berkeley will, resuscitate it at some future date. They might, but it's anytime you do citizen science, as it's sometimes called, you have to have a certain degree of support. You have to, debug the software. People are forever asking you questions about, well, I put this on my computer. Now my hard drive has been erased. What do I do? That kind of thing. And, these guys try to be smart about it by not revealing how to get in touch with them in any way. But nonetheless, it took time. And they just didn't have the money to pay for that time.
Yeah, call Amazon with a complaint. Same outcome.
Yeah.
So that being said, a lot of people are asking on the same note is if they want to be involved looking for signals from home, minus that program, what would they do? What steps would they take?
Well, there's not much they can do actually at the moment. I mean, again, we've considered making more of the data available to people, but as soon as you do that, again, you have a support problem because people say, okay, all those data are available, but I don't have the software to download it into a form I can use, right? And it's not that it's impossible to do that. It's not. But again, you have to have somebody, whose job it is to handle that. And there's just no money. Yeah. It's all run on donations. All of SETI in this country is run with private donations.
Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough. And it's funny, that I'm glad you said that. So in reply to some of these people that are asking questions, and what I'm going to, tag up in this podcast is if people want these programs, they're going to have to put some system together where it's donated, right? I would have to figure out how to go about verbing that for them, because I would like that program to exist personally.
Yep.
Yeah, that's tough. I never considered that. So what relationship does SETI have with NASA?
Well, when I joined the SETI Institute, when they called me up and said, you want a job here, that was back about 1989, 1990. And at that point, SETI was a NASA program. That is to say, NASA had a SETI project. They did. And it was fairly ambitious. The budget for it ran between $5 and $10 million a year. That's not very much for anything in the NASA budget, as you know. I mean, any satellite you put up costs, $100 million or whatever. But, so it was like $5 or $10 million a year. But they had spent that money for about a decade building equipment to use for an experiment, receiving equipment. But then in 1992, they finally turned on the systems. They turned it on Columbus Day, so this last weekend, but in 1992. and before it was 1 year old, before the program had really even gotten going, Congress, the Senate, the U.S. Senate, killed it. They said, sorry, we don't want NASA spending any time looking for aliens. So that ended that.
Wow. That's a really close-minded approach.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was politics, actually. We tried to talk to this particular senator about what he was doing. He was looking for something that would get him reelected, to be quite frank. And, so he had tried other things and they hadn't worked. So he seized on this late at night. But, they're not interested in hearing from you about it, obviously. They don't want you to get in the way. They just want to do it.
Right. Yeah, they feel like they could budget for other, in a picture perfect world. Let's talk about another, I guess, a hypothetical. If you were to get ample money, like you had a lot of capital back behind SETI, what would they want? What would they want to build from that?
Well, I think, it's pretty straightforward. What you would build is a bigger radio telescope. I'm sure you would do that.
Right.
And then better receivers so you could go through the stars of the nearby galaxy more quickly. But you'd also, I think, ought to do other things, because one of the problems with SETI, as it's been practiced since 1960, is that, you point an antenna at a star system and you hope that a signal is reaching your antenna just as you point at it. And the only way that's likely to happen is if the aliens, if there are any around that star, are very patient. They set up a transmitter that's on for thousands, millions, maybe billions of years. Now, I can't see us doing anything like that, but of course we're still a new society.
Right.
But maybe, maybe the aliens do it. But I honestly think, I've sort of written about this recently, it might be a better bet to forget about trying to pick up a signal. To begin with, I mean, there's that synchronicity problem, right? You may not be listening when the signal passes over you. But the second thing is, they might be afraid to transmit, right? I mean, you're a bunch of Klingons sitting on some random planet,
right?
And you don't know what other beings might be out there. Maybe there's some others out there. But you don't know if they're more advanced or less advanced. Are they hostile? Are they all poets? What?
Yeah, they might have a dark agenda. Stephen Hawking said something to the nature of where we should not reach out.
Yeah, that wasn't an original idea of Stephen's, and his daughter once told me she didn't quite agree with her dad on that. But all that Stephen Hawking said was, well, when a less advanced society meets a more advanced society, it doesn't work out so well for the less advanced society.
Well, that's human nature, though. That's we're basing it on us. We don't know that for other species.
We don't. But the argument that's made by people who said don't broadcast anything is that, you could argue that they are all peaceful, but you don't know that.
Right.
And, wouldn't you feel bad if you broadcast something, hey, this is Earth talking, and, they sent a bunch of spacecraft to Earth and just incinerated Los Angeles, some other likely target. I mean, you'd feel bad about it. So, they say, don't take the chance. I think that that's a silly thing to say, honestly, because not that I'm convinced that all the aliens are peaceable, but we're already broadcasting all sorts of stuff into the sky, principally radar, but also television and FM radio and things like that. So it's too late. That horse has blown the barn.
As a kid, I saw a movie. What was the name of that movie? It was a movie where these kids went to space because, Explorer. And the aliens were watching all our television, and that's how they were trying to communicate back with us. I Love Lucy reruns.
Well, that's an amusing idea. I mean, it's not that they would watch it for entertainment. Right. Presumably, they wouldn't get the jokes. But, they would at least know somebody's here. So maybe a better way to find the aliens is not to count on finding signals. Just look for the most advanced of them, right? Because, the universe is 3 times as old as the Earth is. So there could be aliens out there that are billions of years more advanced. So what do, right? If you're a billion years more advanced than we are, what does your day job look like?
Yeah, really.
And it may be that, they build really big stuff, Dyson spheres or something so big that you can see it from a great distance. And that's something that you don't have to worry about this synchronization. You can look at any time and see it. You don't have to hope that you're looking just at the time that a signal arrives. It's like, walking around the deserts of Egypt, you see these pointy buildings in the distance. Say, wow, we found the pharaohs. Well, you haven't found the pharaohs. They're dead. But, you know that they were there because of these artifacts. So maybe that's the best way to look for ET.
I agree. When you're saying earlier about pointing, at the right place at the right time, this is where my imagination runs wild. I picture a budget large enough where we'd have an antenna on pretty much every corner of the planet or for the most part on most surfaces, right? Because that would be pretty efficient.
Yeah, quite expensive. But
very expensive.
If you could do that, I mean, a big antenna like the one that collapsed recently in Puerto Rico, we use that for SETI.
How did that collapse?
Well, nobody. I mean, as far as I know, nobody knows.
That's bizarre.
The cable snapped, right? And I've been down there many times. And you look at the cables that are holding the whole thing together, and they're as thick as your arm. I mean, these are not thin threads or anything.
Right? Yeah.
These steel cables. You don't expect the Brooklyn Bridge to collapse.
No. Yeah.
Right?
That has a life expectancy well past what we believe.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know why it collapsed. I'm not sure that they know themselves yet. Now, keep in mind, it's a difficult environment in Puerto Rico because it's very humid. There's a lot of rain.
Right.
So, you get corrosion. And on top of that, you get the occasional hurricane roaring through.
Yeah.
So that may stress things.
That's true too. They're top victims for that, along with Cuba and well, I live in Florida, so we dread everything that comes their way because eventually it's going to come ours. So
right.
It's a scary process. So
yeah. But in any case, you need an antenna like that, and to build something like that today would probably cost on the order of $100 million. So it's a little unclear. If you want to monitor the nearest, 100,000 stars, then that's 100,000 times 100 million, right? That's 10,000 billion. Well, that's a lot, right? That's $10 trillion, unless I did the math wrong. And that's you got to win the lottery or something.
Yeah,
more than once.
Imagine that you'd have to win the lottery to be able to do what we need to do for science.
Maybe.
Look, I promise you, if I ever hit the big lottery, some of it's going to go to the research, right? Because I want to know.
Yeah,
that's my position on everything. I just got to know. So then there's the other scenario. What about satellites?
Well, what about satellites? I'm all for satellites, but how do you mean?
Like for SETI, like if you were to have, again, now this goes back to my imagination. You take the idea of surrounding Earth with these things, and then you put something in space that has something viewing on all sides.
You could, but what counts here is how big the collecting area is. In other words, this is one of those fields where bigger really is better. Because if you just have the kind of antenna dish, if you will, that you can mount on a satellite, I mean, it's not going to be much more than 10 or 20 feet across, right? The Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico was 1,000 feet across. It's hard to put something 1,000 feet across up into space.
Yeah, you're right.
You'd have to. I mean, you could, in principle, manufacture it there. Just send up a lot of parts. Or
you'd have to build it in space.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, I recently watched this documentary, and it was discussing the largest things in the universe that we know of, anyhow, and it blew my mind. Like it was really hard for me to digest that there's things that are that large. I mean, that lets you know how, preoccupied we are in our own existence, but I've never had a documentary about space make me just question, here, life, like, oh my God, we're way small on the totem pole as far as things go on.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's said we're like a mote of dust in a giant arena with lots of other dust. That's what we are. But on the other hand, we have reality television, so that's something.
Here's another question too, and I got this, and I don't know that this was directed to SETI as so much as it is just science itself. There's moons by Saturn, and one of them, a Titan?
Probably Enceladus.
And Enceladus, there's the other one, Enceladus. They're asking, look, I say this for the people listening that asked, if life's there, it's very primitive. It's definitely not built a radio station. I assure you that much. Because then we would know of it. It's that close.
Well, you would know, but there are other considerations. You don't even have to go so far as to say, well, they probably wouldn't build any radio transmitters. They would build, who knows what they'd build, the video games or something. I mean, what? But the real point about Enceladus is that the liquid water there, where you might have this life, it's a big ocean, all right. It's in the center of the moon. Right? This is a moon about the same size as, it's actually smaller than our own moon, whatever. But the water is all in the center. It's a hidden ocean, right? So there's not a whole lot of light getting down into that thing, right? And if there's no light, there's no photosynthesis. If there's no photosynthesis, you don't have any plants or any animals to eat. So there could be bacteria there because bacteria can survive on, what are called black smokers, these sort of vents at the bottom of the ocean where hot stuff bubbles up.
The extremophiles are called.
Right. Because they're living in an environment that you would find really tedious after a week. So, you could have that. You could have bacteria, and you might say, well, that's not very interesting. But it is very interesting. If you found that there were bacteria, living some sort of bacterial existence in the center of a moon of Saturn, you would know that, well, life at least, began in two places, just in our solar system. And that would tell you right away that life is not some sort of miracle, that life is just an infection that's all over the place.
Yeah, it would be history. It would alter some history books, right? If there's life elsewhere.
It would alter them all.
Yeah.
From that date forward, you would know, okay, Earth is kind of interesting, but Earth is not necessarily special.
Right. Yeah. And and it's gonna alter some other books too. Well, I don't get into that. But and the truth is, let's say we did find primitive life there at that level. We still have no interest we would want to study it, but I don't think we'd put a budget together for it. But I promise you, if we found shiny stuff there, like gold and silver, believe you me, we'd find a way, because that's a way for us. It's resources, right?
Well, it just depends, right? I mean, there's a lot of resources in the asteroids, and there are a lot of asteroids, right? I mean, if you're looking for things like platinum's useful in industry, not just for making jewelry. I think it's more valuable per ounce than gold. I may be wrong about that. But in any case, asteroids have a lot of platinum. But the trick is to get it out of the asteroid and, into your hands.
Yeah.
That's not trivial. You got to have a space program to do that. And that costs you money. And maybe it costs you more money than the platinum is worth.
That's probably right. You go there, you're in debt.
Right. I mean, actually, there are at least 3 companies that have started up, 3 startups that are interested in mining asteroids. So, they seem to think that you can make a buck at it. But, I don't know that the aliens would come here for that kind of thing, because they got asteroids in their own star system.
Right.
They don't have to come here and take our platinum.
That's true too, because if they are traveling that vastness, or they exist anyhow,
right.
Yeah, they have the means to do their own, to get their own resources.
Well, exactly. Why pay that enormous shipping charge?
I hear that a lot. Like, if they're there, don't tell them, because they're going to come here and take our stuff. Like, what stuff? There's a lot of stuff in space, like crazy stuff. It's endless. Yeah,
anything that we have in terms of resources, they have where they are. And again, they get it much more quickly and with a lot less cost. So they wouldn't come here for resources. I mean, it's unclear why they come here at all. As a matter of fact, I've been on panels where we tried to think of something.
I'll give you one for your panel. If they were to come here, right? And I say this a lot. This is like you and I walking through a park, right? We're just walking through a park, and we look down. There's an ant pile, and they're driving cars, flying planes, throwing bombs at each other, using complex language. We're shutting the park down. We're going to watch it for a long time. How does this evolve? How does it unfold? I got to know. We would rope that park off in a heartbeat to learn the evolution of that species. And
I don't know. The kids I grew up with would have gotten a big magnifying glass and burned them all.
Wiped them all out. No evolution. But for us, at the very minimum, we're definitely entertaining. There's no question. We have everything from horror, drama, comedy. We're a strange species. And I say this a lot too. It's unfortunate because, for me in 2021, the fact that we still have racism blows my mind, blows me away. I don't even understand how it's possible anymore. So,
well, the aliens presumably are considerably beyond all that, at least the ones we'll ever hear from, let alone any that might come here. And, presumably if they're much more advanced than we are, I mean, more than 1,000 years more advanced, or 100 years, not even 1,000, they're probably artificial intelligence.
Right.
Because the advantage of that is they don't mind sitting in a seat buckled up for 75,000 years for a rocket ride.
Yeah. Right? That goes to my theory too about the whole, they could be mechanical uploaded conscious or an advanced AI, because they're immortal and time doesn't matter to them. But that's why, and I'm not, I don't argue people's thoughts and their perspectives, but my idea that something biological come here, it's not so strong, only because, there's that travel factor. Why did they come here? If we're going to be researched, like if you and I found a planet that was primitive, let's go back to they're in their Roman era, right? We're sending machines. We're not going. It's one, we're not going to live through the travel. Two, it's more feasible to send the AI there to study and then send back report.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. There's this idea that, Homo sapiens will boldly go where no hominid has gone before.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a great line and all. Well, I like the music, but it wasn't entirely realistic.
No. Here's some food for thought. You have Elon. He wants to go to Mars and set up shop. And prior to talking to you, I thought this immediately. There's huge real estate on Mars. And if Elon really wants, and he's going to do it regardless, but if he wants full support, imagine setting up a SETI on Mars.
Yeah, actually, Mars is no better for SETI than Arizona or
Well, yeah, but there
place
you
on Earth.
build,
I mean, it's not that Mars is any closer to the aliens.
well, no,
Right.
but you could build as large as you want there. There's no real estate to question, right? Because who lives there?
Yeah, but somebody has to maintain the equipment. That's the problem. And you have to have the facilities to build it all.
That's a
And
good
now,
point.
you also need all those programmers to come in and write the computer code to run it all. And, they may say, look, I'm not going to Mars to do that. The fast food isn't anything like what I got here,
Right.
in downtown Tampa or something. So I'm not going to do it. But where you could put a SETI telescope to advantage would be the backside of the moon, the side of the moon that we never see here from Earth, because any facility there is forever shadowed, is forever protected against all the radio interference that we got coming off the Earth, all the time. So it's radio quiet on the backside of the moon.
Is that not being discussed anywhere? Because that's a great idea.
Yeah, well, I think it is a good idea, and it is discussed at conferences. But it's discussed in the same way that they discuss building me a 47-room house. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, it's practical to get to and from the moon more so than Mars, right?
Oh yeah, no, it's much easier to get to the moon.
Here's how
you got a problem, of course. If you have the radio telescope on the backside of the moon, you got to get the data back to Earth,
right?
So you got to run a fiber optic cable or something.
Yeah. So here's how you sell it. Here's how you sell that. We got to hope there's shiny stuff there, right? Because if I hate to say this, but if you go to the moon, you find shiny stuff, corporations will, the funding will be endless, right?
Yeah, well, probably so. Although, a better bet, because at the moment, I wouldn't say that there's tremendous hope for, precious metals on the moon. This has to do with how the moon was formed and all. I mean, there could be some, but
right.
I think a better bet is tourism. Set up a Holiday Inn or two.
Or Disney World. Disney would do it in a heartbeat.
Right. Disney World Moon.
Yeah.
Yes.
The real Space Mountain. They would do it in a heartbeat. So
that's coming. You just have to wait a little.
Yeah, for real. And then at said point, you tell Disney, like, look, we just need a large set or thing on the back, a scope or whatever, and I'm sure it'll jump on this, right? I hate to say this is all imagination and theory, but at some point we got to make the leap because we're running out of real estate on Earth. We really are. I mean, I can't think of anywhere else we're going to build grander things without it, I guess on mountains, right?
But you're right. Adam, you're absolutely right. It's getting crowded here, but I don't want to discourage you, but putting people on Mars or the moons doesn't help much, right? Mars is a smaller planet than the Earth is.
Right.
But it doesn't have any oceans. So the amount of acreage is about the same as on Earth, right? Because on Earth, 2/3 of all the surface is covered with oceans. So you can't live there very easily. So Mars and Earth are about equivalent in terms of land area. Now, Mars looks like Arizona in the photo, but the photos you see, but actually it's not like Arizona. It's -50 a lot of the time.
Freezing.
You can't bring the air. There's no liquid water. There's no food. You have to grow it or bring it. I mean, it's a terrible place. I mean, it's scenic. You want to do a selfie, but it's a terrible place. And even if you did it, all you could do then is double the Earth's population because, that's all the acreage you have.
Yeah.
And we double the Earth's population roughly every 30 years or 40 years these days, right? So all that does is buy you, a half century worth of time. That's not very much.
No, you're right. For the future of what SETI is, what is the future for SETI? So I ask this because somebody brought this to my attention. I don't know how true it is. Again, I read comments and email, and someone was stating something to the effect that we're going to be using lasers to start mapping out stars and planets. I mean, I feel like we would have done that already.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what they mean by that, but maybe. I mean, there's a project called Breakthrough Star Shot. And the idea is you throw up into orbit a bunch of miniature satellites, Earth satellites, or spacecraft, call them spacecraft, but they're about the size of a silver dollar or a matchbook cover or something like that. They're very small.
Right.
Okay. But they can do something. Right? a triumph of miniaturization. So they're up there in orbit. Now you get a super duper laser. You're on the ground, or you could put it in orbit too, and you just hit them with this laser, and it gives the bright light gives them a kick, right? And you can, in fact, kick them up to maybe a quarter or a third the speed of light, which is very, very fast, much faster than any rocket we have. So you kick them up to that high speed, and then they can get to a nearby star system in, 15 years or something like that.
Right.
Okay. So the only trick is, can they send back any pictures or,
Yeah.
what do you see up there? That's what you want to know. And these things are so small, it's a bit of a challenge to figure out how they can send you back anything. But people talk about doing this.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the future, again, and I guess I asked this because when I asked what the future of SETI is, what can we expect from SETI?
Well, as we've discussed here, I bet everybody a cup of coffee that we'll actually find a signal coming in the next 15 years. Now, if not, at least you get that cup of coffee. So it's not a dead loss for you. But I think that in this, in the same time scale, right? I think that we will find life in space, and it may only be those bacteria living in the interior of Enceladus, or maybe some of Jupiter's moons. The 3 moons of Jupiter, Europa most famously, that might have life because they have lots and lots of water. It's all microbial life. It's all microscopic, but still, if you're talking about finding life, I think that is likely to happen in the next 15 or 20 years. And, Homo sapiens has had a long run so far. It's 300,000 years since the first Homo sapiens, and none of those guys knew whether there was any life up there or not.
Right.
But this generation, our generation, your generation, we might learn the answer to that. That would be interesting. And it would be particularly interesting if we learned that some of that life out there is intelligent.
I'm betting we find it sooner because I don't know how. So I saw this on a documentary, recent one too. They found some sort of gas in Venus that makes them believe that it's biological.
Yeah. Interesting result from not quite a year ago, I think it was.
Yeah.
And these are people at MIT and also in the United Kingdom. And they found phosphine. Now, phosphine may not play a big role in your life, but phosphine is a well-known gas, for chemists. And they seem to have found it because it emits a little bit of radiation, right? So they were using a big radio telescope down in Chile, actually, and they found this layer of the atmosphere of Venus that seemed to have phosphine gas in it. Now, you might say, well, that's fine, but I've got things to do. What do I care? And the reason you care is there are only 2 ways really to make phosphine, right? At least in large quantities. One is you have a lot of volcanoes, right? Or 2, you have a lot of bacteria that, for whom phosphine is sort of an exhaust gas. So what is it? Is there some sort of floating microbial life in the clouds of Venus? Or is it just a lot of volcanic activity on the surface? Well, we know there are volcanoes on Venus, but there aren't that many. There don't seem to be enough to produce the phosphine. So at the moment, all you can say is, well, maybe there's floating life on Venus. However, there's also a question whether they actually detected phosphine, but that's another story, which is not nearly as interesting.
Yeah, I hope that, for the sake of saying it's somewhere, I hope they do find it.
I do too.
Before we close, Seth, I'm going to ask one final question, and I want you to treat this like the childhood thought. What do you hope we find?
Well, of course, I've been working in SETI all these years, so
right.
I'd be happy to learn that they're phosphine-producing microbes in the atmosphere of Venus. You can see Venus after sunset. These days, just go out, look to the west, and see what looks like a bright star. You could be looking at a lot of microbes up there. I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
that would certainly be interesting. But for me, the most interesting thing would be to find a signal that was made by somebody who was smart enough to build a radio transmitter. Because if they can do that, then maybe they have something interesting to say.
That's a good point. I hope we find that. I really do, because. Yeah. I definitely will not be satisfied if we don't find it, because I'm not one of these that I'm not like, oh, we're the only thing we're special. I don't care about that. I want to find something new,
Well, here's something else, just the last thought there. That is, if you find somebody else, I mean, Homo sapiens, 300,000 years, that's nothing. the dinosaurs were around for 150 million years. So, we don't have anything on them. But sooner or later, Homo sapiens will go extinct. I mean, it's guaranteed.
Right.
And it might not be for another million years. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's sooner. But after it's extinct, you might ask, well, gee, Bob, what was it all about? I mean, why did we worry about all these things? Why did we do our homework? Why did we go to all those movies? Why did I yell at my neighbors? I mean, what was it all about? What was the point of it all? But if you find somebody else out there, you could send them, in principle anyhow, you could send them, here's the history of Homo sapiens. This is what humans did during their run.
Right.
How long that is. And that at least preserves it, so it isn't totally lost, right? It's like stacking up dinosaur bones in the museum. At least they have that legacy.
God, wouldn't it be bad if we sent that and it's all the science and all the discovery and they take to reality TV out of all of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's not totally unrealistic.
Yeah.
It might just be that.
Yeah, out of all the interesting things we could send, they're like, wow, this show is crazy. You got to watch this. So, Seth, I enjoyed having you on a lot.
It was my pleasure, Adam. I really enjoyed listening. And it was fun talking with you.
Yeah, and if there's anything you want me to post up in not the comments, but the description, just let me know. Send it up and I'll put it out there.
Okay, will do.
All right, Seth. Thank you very much, sir.
All righty. Bye-bye.